Today we're going to take a look at the Sony ZV1, or ZV1, depending on where you live. But instead of just reviewing the camera and then putting it in a box never to be looked at ever again, I want to share with you my real experience of making this fit into my workflow as a YouTuber. Now, I bought this with my own pennies for 3 different purposes. 1. I wanted a vlogging camera that can film great quality shots but is lighter than my GH5, which weighs about as much as a goat. 2. I wanted a second camera angle for use in the studio when shooting review episodes to spice things up a bit. 3. I wanted a camera to use when streaming on Twitch that keeps my beautiful face in focus at all times whilst blurring the background for some serious bokeh. If any of these things sound like what you want to use it for, then stick around and join me as I tell you whether or not the ZV1 has met those needs in the way I'd hoped. Welcome back to another episode of STU'S Reviews. Before we begin, if you find today's video of any help to you at all, I would really appreciate it if you return the favour and hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, because every like really helps me out in return. Anyway, if you're a subscriber of STU'S Reviews and you watch my content, you'll probably notice that was a little bit of a different intro. I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Also, this is a bit of a disclaimer. I am no photography or video whiz. I just use these things, doing what I do, sharing content with you guys. So don't expect the absolute boffin talk about sensors and all that nonsense. This is a real world use review of the Sony ZV1. So with that said, let's get stuck in and look at its primary function, or the first thing that I bought it for, vlogging. I've got a few projects coming up that really require me to have something smaller but can still do some good stuff. I can't use my GH5 at the end of a GorillaPod, for example. It's just not practical, especially when you consider I've got the camera, I've got a gigantic lens, I've got a massive bloody screen on top of it, and whatever other attachments I've got. This makes it so much easier, and there are a ton of specs in this that make it very attractive for that. First of all, it can film in 4K 30 frames a second, which is the format that I use for everything I do. Another spec that I think is ideal for vlogging is the aperture. Now, the aperture can go from 1.8 to 2.8 depending on how far you are zoomed in. Now, 1.8 at its widest is awesome, and it means you are going to get some really lovely blurred out backgrounds, lovely focus on your face when you are vlogging. And it's not hard to get that effect as well. In fact, on this camera, there's even a button that automatically blurs the background out for you, changes the settings so that you've got that awesome bokeh in the background. You can press that button again to make everything clear and clean and crisp if you want to, say, do a shot with you in the environment and you want your background to be in focus as well. The fact that Sony have added a 1-button press for that is pretty good, and that just shows that it's aimed specifically at someone who, like me, wants to vlog with it and wants quick transitions between a blurred background and a non-blurred background. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to press this button here. You should see that everything is now defocused in the background, although it's brightened me up a little bit. It overrides all the settings. If I press it again, it should make everything pretty clear in the background. Obviously, it makes things much better exposed. When you are recording as well, there's a great big red LED on the front, which is great and easy to see in pretty much any type of lighting. Not always the way with the screen, and I'll get into that very shortly. But the red LED is a nice big touch for this camera, and again, not something that my GH5 has. Instead, I've got this tiny little red dot on the screen to see when I'm recording. It's not ideal, whereas this, much easier. The 3-capsule mic as well on the top is really nice. It does pick up voices very well, so for vlogging it is ideal. And it also comes with an awesome little wind filter too. And as well, there's software in the camera to minimize the amount of noise coming from the wind too. So as a combination, the mics are actually very good for a small little camera. But don't just take my word for it. I went somewhere extremely windy to test out the filter and the noise reduction. If you can see that is a big storm coming over there. So I've come out to Hurdis Ridge to test how well the microphone does with the funny little hat on the top. Now this is with the wind reduction off currently, so this is now the exact same wind level. I've just turned the wind noise reduction on in the software, and again I've still got the funny little hat. For those that perhaps want even better quality audio or purely just one directional audio, you have got a little mic slot in the top there so that you can add something to the hot shoe mount that is a bit better. As well as a wind filter, there's also a built-in ND filter. Now the importance of that is that if you're out and about and it's really, really bright, traditionally if your camera didn't have an ND filter, you'd have to turn up something like the aperture to 5, 6, 7, 8 or even higher to make sure that everything was exposed properly. The consequence of this is you're not going to get that awesome blurred background that you've bought this camera for. The ND filter is off at the moment, so the background is a little bit blurry, but it's not as blurry as it could be if I put the ND filter on like now. So the ND filter is on, which means that the aperture can open up a little bit more and create more of a depth of field, which is really, really nice. And again, if I just turn that off, you can see a little bit clearer everywhere, a little bit more blurred. So that ND filter is awesome. I think is an awesome little feature that goes underrated in a lot of people's reviews and content about this. As well as those two filters, it also has built in a beauty filter, which is a bit controversial really. You don't have to have this on, but if you do turn it on, it smooths your skin in the shots that you take. Just in case you're wondering, I'm going to turn the beauty filter on full now. I'm just going to look at the screen. There we go. Low, mid, high. Look at that. I'll never ever touch that, simply because my skin is already as smooth as a newborn baby, but some people might really want that. Look at that. Doesn't get rid of wrinkles though, does it? So there's some awesome specs and features for vlogging on this camera. But what are the cons? Now there are actually some rather horrible cons of using this as a vlogging camera. And the first is the lens. Now the lens at its widest is 24mm, or the equivalent of. That's not very wide at all. And in fact, that can lead to some shots that are rather close to your face, or much closer than I'd actually like. And here's another thing as well. The stabilisation will crop it in even further to about 30mm or more. That's not very good. So if you wanted the widest angle on this, you're going to have to turn all the stabilisation shots off, which leads to shots like this. No, I'm only joking. The footage isn't that bad, but I'm walking down the street at the moment. Obviously this is as wide as it can possibly go, with the most minimal stabilisation that this thing has to offer. If I turn the stabilisation on a little bit more, you'll see exactly how bad it gets. So now I've got the active stabilisation on. I mean, it works much better. It's really, really nice, but it does crop in a hell of a lot more onto my face. Some people might like this, but if I wanted to show you the background with me in it, it's next to useless. It just crops in a little bit too much in my opinion, especially because that lens is already cropped in as it is. Another pretty horrific flaw for using this when vlogging is the screen. Now the screen itself isn't that bad, it's pretty handy, but what you can't do is see it when you're wearing polarised sunglasses. How did that get past the designers at Sony? Look, I'll show you. To me, that's ridiculous, because this is a vlogging camera, and you use vlogging cameras when you're on holiday and you're outside and you're doing nice things, and most of the time when it's sunny, people will wear things like sunglasses, which means you won't be able to see the screen, especially if they're good quality ones and they're polarised. How on earth did that get past Sony? I do not know, but that, to me, is a ridiculous fatal flaw of using this for vlogging. So that is my experience with vlogging on this camera. Some fantastic specs and features that this can do, but also quite horrific flaws as well. But what about my second purpose of this as a secondary studio camera? Now, I shoot on the GH5 in front of the desk, as you've seen just now. And when I'm doing things like unboxings, it's fine, I can unbox here, but I wanted to get you guys involved a bit more, and I wanted you to see a bird's eye view, or almost my point of view, of what I'm looking at. So I've got this because it's small and light, and I can mount it above the desk, very much like I have done in the most up-to-date unboxings. I must say it actually does a rather good job of keeping up with what I want it to essentially focus on. If I hold a product up to the camera, it simply blurs the background out, and then I can put it back down and it keeps everything nice and in focus on the desk. And it's even got the ability to have something called a product showcase, which rather than tracking your face, it will automatically track anything that you're holding up in front of it in the essentially foreground of your picture or shot. And I like that. I think that's awesome, and it makes things like this, for me, really, really handy, because constantly I'm holding tech and I'm trying to show you something, and it just means that I don't have to worry that it's not going to focus on this. I mean, in the past, let's say now with the GH5, the only thing this will focus on is my face, and let's be honest, the GH5 isn't the best for autofocus. And if I try and hold something up like this, it will never ever focus on that product. It will only try and focus on my face, whereas the Sony ZV1 will also focus on products that I hold in front of me rather than having to put it in front of my face. Fantastic. But very much like vlogging use, for use in the studio, it has some flaws as well. Firstly, the thermals are absolutely shocking. You're only going to get about 25 minutes of use before it shuts down in an attempt to not set itself on fire. And that's with everything turned off in terms of thermal protection in the actual software. Less than ideal if you're doing a very long shoot such as I do, like the unboxings, which last about an hour and a half. I can't have this thing above me rolling at all times. Instead, I have to press the record button every time I think there's something interesting going on the actual desk. That's not a problem for me, but let's say now I had it attached to my tripod on the other side of the room, like you are right now. I'm not going to be able to hit record and stop and pause and turn it back on all the time if my shoot goes over 25 minutes. Not ideal. Secondly, the design of the undercarriage. Again, this is another design thing of this camera that has slipped past some approval thing, and I just don't know who's approved this. If you have any form of quick release plate on the bottom of the camera, you can no longer access the battery compartment and memory card compartment. I am speechless. It's just ridiculous. Okay, now I can hear you saying, but Stu, it charges through USB and also you can transfer your files through USB. Well, yes, okay. Number one, you can charge it via USB. Problem with that is, let's say you're out on a shoot or you're out all day vlogging, this thing only can record for 45 minutes at a time. Maybe you're out all day and want more footage than that. Well, to change the battery then, you're going to have to unscrew your quick release plate. First of all, I need a 20p coin, which I don't have access to at the moment because who has cash anymore? And the second point of being able to transfer stuff via USB to the actual computer, I would say 100% of my attempts to transfer stuff via USB, it has always failed one of the clips. I don't know why this is, I can't work it out. Could be the fact I'm using a Mac, could be Final Cut, could be the software on this. It could be a number of different things. But in my experience, it succeeds at 99% of them, but then there's always that one clip that just seems to fail. So I have to then take everything apart, take the memory card out and import that clip manually, and it works fine after doing that. So it's just a massive inconvenience. Also, on the subject of transferring via cable rather than straight from the card, this thing has micro USB. Warning. It's 2020. Why has this thing got micro USB in 2020? One, it's slow as hell, so if you are transferring through cable, it's just impractical. And two, it's micro USB. That should have been put to bed in 1998. Did it exist in 1998? Anyway, it's an exaggeration. The point is, again, the designer of this, people should be having words with them. But seriously, who is designing this? I just don't understand. One other thing you might need to consider when thinking about using it as a studio product is you can't change the lens. Not a massive problem, but the Lumix G100, which is their equivalent of this, is a great camera, Some of the features aren't quite as good as the Sony ZV1, but you can change the lens on that, and I would have loved to have seen that from the ZV1. Maybe in the second iteration of this they'll do that, but at the moment, fixed lens is definitely a consideration. But overall, actually, I think it's an okay studio camera. And let's just say I replaced the GH5 with this. This is now using the ZV1 instead of the GH5 with no extra gubbins. And in fact, I've got my GH5 over there recording the ZV1, so you know there's no hokey pokey nonsense going on in the background. It is exactly what you'll get. So overall, as a studio camera, it's got some great benefits, but for me, rather than using it as a main camera, I'm definitely going to be using it as a secondary camera. The final use for me was to use this on Twitch as a streaming camera. Now, when Sony brought this camera out originally, they had no software to do this natively, so you had to use a capture card on your computer to make this work. Well, as of Thursday, Sony have brought out their software that allows you to use this as a webcam without the need of a capture card, so you can simply use the micro USB to plug it in. The problem here for me is that as of today, in August 2020, I can't use that software because I'm using a Mac, and Sony haven't supported Mac with their webcam software. So please, Sony, if you're watching this review, please support the Mac for your webcam software for this, so I can get rid of the Medusa's hair of a setup that I'm using to currently get this on the computer through a capture card. Please. This means that I haven't tested this out with direct connection for streaming. So if you've got a Windows PC and you've got one of these and you're watching this, please let us know how that experience is in the comments below, because I'd be really interested, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people watching this review right now who want to know as well, so let us know. With that said, for streaming, this thing has been, in my eyes, unbeatable. Yes, it was a little bit finicky getting it started and getting it set up, because for starters, you can't power this thing through your computer and use it for streaming at the same time. That's if you're using a Mac. I guess if you're using Windows, that'll be slightly different now. But for the Mac, I had to power this separately using a wall charger for USB. Not a problem. It just means more cables, more Medusa's hair, more mess, and it's just a faff. But if you get it connected up through a capture card, or I guess potentially now through Sony's own software, this thing is just awesome. Because it's not recording as well directly to a memory card, it's not overheating, which means that you can easily use it for hours while streaming, and it won't shut off and it won't fail. It's been phenomenal, and I've loved it because of the focus, the fact it can keep me or whatever I'm showing the audience in focus at all times. Look at that focus. I'm sorry, that focus is insane. Look at it, look. It means to see my face in high fidelity. And I know this has been something that most reviewers have spoken about, but it is 100% true. I can absolutely verify that the focus on this is just something out of this world. I've never experienced something with such fast and smooth focus and the ability to keep whatever it is I'm showing at it, whether that's my face or a product, in shot. I've never experienced anything like this, and if you want to be wowed, this is something to be wowed at. Honestly, if you want to see what this looks like on stream, just head on over to my Twitch and check out any of the past broadcasts. I'll leave a link to that in the description below so you can check it out, but I'm still using this as a Twitch camera as well, and it's just amazing. Now, in terms of cost, this thing will set you back £700 or $699 at the moment. Now, is that good value? Well, here are my final thoughts on the Sony ZV1 or ZV1. This is a camera that undeniably focuses on content creators, but I feel like the ZV1 contradicts itself. If it wanted to be truly versatile for creators, then it would be able to record for longer. You'd be able to change the lens and, God forbid, maybe even wear sunglasses whilst filming. I mean, this sort of stuff can be done within this price bracket of £700. To me, I don't think it's worth that price tag, given some of the obvious omissions in its feature set. Perhaps if it was £100 cheaper, we might be having a very different conversation. But would that stop me buying it again? Maybe, but in truth, despite its flaws, it's actually a really useful little camera that has managed to fit into the different roles I'd laid out for it. And that autofocus, well, that's something else. So that is my experience with the Sony ZV1 or ZV1. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. And if you are already subscribed, press that like button because it costs absolutely nothing and it really helps me out. And if you want to see more STU'S reviews, hit that notification bell and you'll be the first to find out when new videos land. But other than that, guys, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.